Today I'm going to be piecing together two prophecies. I've been speaking about the Apostolic Foundation, and here the apostle and the prophets mentioned in these prophecies, but today I'm speaking more about where we are today and how things are unfolding, how things are unraveling. And I'll be looking at two prophecies, one by Dr. Maurice Galar and one by Shane Warren. And from these two prophecies, we will see how events should unfold. This is not a "thus saith the Lord." It's not something that God has revealed to me in a vision or in a dream, but it's based on what has been revealed to Dr. Maurice Galar and Shane Warren. If we look at the prophecy, it's not in sequential order. It jumps from different paragraphs, and one has to put this together. And I'm looking at the prophecy by Dr. Maurice Galar. It's December the 1st, 2011. It's quite a few years ago. And in this prophecy, we first see the signpost quoting, "I am taking Billy Graham home to heaven soon. When you see this, know that my time of grace for the Gentile nations is coming to a close." This took place on February 2018. February 21st, 2018, that's when Billy Graham went home to heaven. So that was the sign, the first sign that the time of grace would be coming to an end, that the doors of grace would begin to close. If we look further at this prophecy, we will see that it speaks of an all-out war in the Middle East coming from the north. And if you've been watching the news lately, you'll actually realize that this could happen at any time. There's been an increase in tensions between Iran, Lebanon, Syria, and Israel in recent days. And many threats have been made from both sides. But if you look carefully, you'll see that this is the event that leads to the other events. And let me just describe this war in Dr. Maurice Galar's vision. He says, "There is coming an all-out war in the Middle East, as the neighboring Arab nations will come against Israel with a sudden missile attack starting from the north, with Hezbollah, Lebanon, and Syria. Other Arab nations will join. Israel will be hit from all sides at once, and there will be deaths and partial destruction of settlements, smaller cities to the north, and some damage to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem as well. Israel will respond with great force, and limited nuclear weapons will release devastation upon the neighboring countries, particularly Lebanon, Damascus, which will be destroyed completely, and the rest of Syria, as well as military strikes into Iran, Gaza, and even northern Egypt, Sinai region." In other words, the strike from the north, it's of course due to provocations, because there have been strikes into Syria, and they will eventually just strike from the north into Israel. And then Israel responds, and Damascus, it's Isaiah 17, will be destroyed. It seems like a tactical nukes will be used. And Israel will suffer many a loss as well. Many will die in this, but they will win the war and increase the land. A lot of the land from Lebanon, Syria, and these other nations will become part of Israel after the war. So we see an all-out war in the Middle East. And if we look carefully just after this paragraph, it says the resulting shaking of the West will then release a tremendous movement of Jews back to Israel. The resulting shaking of the West. In other words, it is a result from this attack from the north and this war, this Psalm 83 war. There's a shaking of the West. And now let us just jump back to the beginning of the prophecy. It says the American dollar is about to lose 30% more of its present value. This will be the second drop since the previous 2008 drop of 20%. And then I'm just skipping a little. It says there will be an even greater financial disaster that is falling upon Europe that will collapse the euro, causing panic and chaos there. And it says this is imminent and the dollar will also follow, although it will survive for a season more. In other words, the euro collapses first and then the dollar afterwards. So this is actually the Western nations. There's an economic shaking that takes place, and this is what David Wilkerson spoke of as well. In 1973, spoke of economic issues happening, then great earthquakes taking place. It's in chapter 2 of his book, The Vision. But this is the economic shaking, first in Europe and then United States. But let us go back. I'm moving back in this a few paragraphs down, and you'll see that the resulting shaking of the West will release many people of the Jews will move back to Israel because of this financial shaking in Europe and in the United States, where many Jews are still living in the United States. They'll move back to Israel. There will no longer be security and stability as it has been up to now in America and Europe. And so we see, actually, if we look carefully at this, we see that first there's this all-out attack from the north, this Middle East war, and there seems to be some limited nuclear strike against Damascus, and this causes economic problems in Europe. It's the first to fall, the euro collapses, and then shortly afterwards the dollar collapses. And note that we've just seen a blood moon during January, on the 21st of January. And this is really a pattern of blood moons. There was a tetrad of blood moons a few years ago, so 2014, 2015, and then 3 blood moons after that, and there were 3 blood moons before that. It's like a pattern that's just been completed. And we know that the blood moons is a sign to Israel, the moon to Israel. So when it's the sun, something to do with the sun, it's to the Gentiles, but to the moon to Israel. And often a blood moon, that really means war to Israel, and that's what it's speaking of, this war from the north. And just as in, I think it was 1948, there was also a blood moon, and there's a war that took place, and that Israel performed as a nation. But also there was a move of God in the church. So there's a double meaning. The moon is also symbolic of often a new move that's coming, a revival, an awakening to the church as well. And this would be the final harvest, the final move of God. So we see that the sign of the blood moon in January, it's just before this that we're just watching now in Israel, what's happening is a lot of tension between Iran, Lebanon, Syria and other countries and Israel, and they're talking of an imminent an attack on Israel even before the elections. And this would be actually the attack from the north. But according to this prophecy, if you look carefully, we see that everything starts with this war in the Middle East. That it results in the euro collapsing, and then the dollar collapsing. And if we start piecing this together, we will see that there's another picture shown by Shane Warren, that when the dollar collapses, so that'll be first the euro collapses, then the dollar collapses. And during this time, I'm just moving to Shane Warren's vision now. And he speaks of this time it's raining dollars. And he said, then the anchorman said, we have another tragedy happening along the New Madrid fault line. A major earthquake with cities crumbling, fires breaking out and people protesting with signs, we want our entitlements. The next scene found Shane sitting, this is with Putin in the Middle East, and then later says a voice from behind him saying, they've divided my land, now I will divide theirs. So in other words, at this time, there seems to be that this is the deal of the century. The Middle East peace plan comes into effect. The time of the dollar collapse, according to Shane Warren's vision. In other words, there will be some kind of peace now because the war will be over and the surrounding nations have been defeated by Israel. But the question with the Palestinians and the Israelis, this peace plan now comes into effect. So it completes the peace in the Middle East. Not only with the surrounding nations, but with the Palestinians as well. And that's the time when this deal of the century seems to take place. And then God judges the United States for that. And that's when these great earthquakes take place. And with the New Madrid fault line, with California, and also with the tsunami and coming on the east coast. So with looking at these two visions, we get actually quite a complete picture with this. So we see first there's an attack from the north into Israel. There's a Middle East war. And then the euro collapses. Then the dollar collapses shortly after. And during this time, that's when the peace deal takes place, and then the great earthquakes follow. And when the United States is weakened because of the dollar collapse, because of the great earthquakes, that's when it seems the Ezekiel 38-39 takes place. The enemies attack with Israel, and the United States may assist and help, and it's a time when Russia and certain other countries will strike and attack America. That's World War III. So we see World War III taking place when America's weak, when it's been impoverished, or there's a dollar collapse, when there are great earthquakes, and then Russia strikes. And that's World War III. So here we see actually a complete picture of what's to come. And we need to just watch what's happening in the Middle East with these threats from the north, because this will be what triggers off the other events. It seems to be, according to these two visions, if we look carefully, just logically, And we put this all together, we will actually see a picture of a whole lot of events starting to unfold. But it starts with an attack from the north. The Psalm 83 war takes place first, and that sets off the rest. So today I'm not looking so much at the apostolic foundation, which is very important, but I'm just giving an outline of the events and putting some pieces together of the puzzle. And if we go back to the vision by Maurice Collard, he also spoke of the last revival. There's one paragraph, he says, the great revival will also begin. God has hidden his holy apostles and prophets for this present hour. So there's the apostles as well, with the apostolic foundation, and there's truth behind this that we need to understand. We mustn't just know about the events that are taking place, but we need to be established in Jesus Christ and to have this foundation in him. And that's what's behind the great revival. And it seems as the judgments come and these things start to happen to the west, and all these things start to take place, that's when the great revival really breaks out. Even though it has been prophesied that there's a tremendous move of God in Africa starting from January this year, the greatest move that will ever happen in Africa. It was by Prophet Sandu Selvaraj spoke of that. So we see the beginning of this final move of God, but it seems like only as the judgments come, as this attack from the north, and the effect on the euro and the dollar, as this comes forth, then the revival will really break out. And in this paragraph says there will be great outpourings of supernatural provision, miracles, and healing in various places. These areas will also become cities of refuge and places of refuge for God's people. So today I'm just want to highlight the order of events. If you look at these two, these visions, these dreams that were given, you might not grasp this because it's not sequential. It doesn't move from paragraph to paragraph. You actually have to work out how this actually all fits together. It starts with the dollar collapsing, but that's not the first event that takes place. If you go further down, you'll actually see that the all-out war in the Middle East results in the shaking on the West. So like pieces of a puzzle, you've got to put them all together. And if you're watching the news now, what we need to be watching is the Middle East. What's happening there? That is definitely the most important, because it's there. That's going to be where the trigger event takes place. It's when there's an attack from the north. When you see some missiles coming into, maybe deep into Israel, or maybe into the airport at the Ben Gurion at Tel Aviv. When you see the missile attack from the north, then you'll know that this sequence of events have begun, has started. And that's what I want to bring to you today, not so much with the apostolic foundation, but more with putting together the pieces of the puzzle, helping you to understand the timing of the coming revival and of the shaking and other events that will take place amongst the nations. God bless.